Hi everyone, welcome back to At America TV. Back again with me, Fifi. I want to welcome all of our audience and members joining us online, and I hope you're doing well and of course, staying safe. For those of you guys who are joining for the first time, At America is the U.S. Embassy American Center here in Jakarta, and our mission is to provide a space for young Indonesians to learn more about the United States. And for those of you who are joining via At America website, Facebook, Periscope, Instagram, Twitter, and also YouTube channel, you can simply leave your question or say hi to us at the comment box for each platform. And in this episode, we will discuss about Earth Optimism, changing the narrative on conservation. So before we begin, let's break the ice with a little game. So I have the questions for tonight event, and the question is, true or false, the airline industry has the biggest carbon footprint compared to any other industries? I repeat the question one more time. True or false, the airline industry has the biggest carbon footprint compared to any other industry? So you can simply answer the question by commenting at our live for each platform of our social media. So stay tuned until the end of the program. I will give live shout out at the end of the program for you guys with the correct answer. So other than that, don't forget to take a selfie during the event and tag at America's Instagram account. All right, and now before we begin the event, I would like to invite Ibu Rachel Cook, Public Affairs Officer from U.S. Embassy Jakarta, for the opening remarks.
Thank you very much. Selamat malam semua. Good evening. On behalf of the U.S. Embassy in Jakarta, atas nama Kedutaan Besar AS, I'd like to offer a heartfelt thank you to everyone tuning in to join us via At America today. Terima kasih telah menghadiri program Earth Optimism. Thanks to our ongoing partnership with the Department of State's Senior Diplomatic Advisor to the Smithsonian Institution, Susan Cleary, we have put together an impressive panel of expert speakers who are joining us from a very early morning in the United States. So I hope that all of you are as excited as I am to meet some of our top scientists, researchers, and program directors working at the Smithsonian to advance knowledge and understanding, not only of our oceans, but of the awesome potential for conservation efforts to succeed despite the challenges facing our environment today. To our distinguished panelists, thank you for taking the time to teach us and also to inspire us. I only recently arrived in Indonesia, and this is my first program with the America team. So a special thank you as well to everyone working behind their laptop screens at home to make this program possible. It's an honor to be joining this fantastic team. Now, I think everyone hopes to be able to gather in person again soon. But for the time being, as we continue to follow social distancing guidelines and do our part for public health, we are extremely grateful for the opportunity to meet virtually. Through America and dozens of other American spaces across the region, people are continuing to come together online to study, collaborate, and work together through online programs like this one. And tonight's topic, Earth Optimism, is a particularly good fit for these spaces. Throughout the region, over 150,000 young leaders aged 18 to 35 take part in Waisili, the Young Southeast Asian Leaders Initiative. Waisili members are dedicated to leading positive change in their communities. Waisili workshops, such as the 2018 Marine Debris Expedition here in Jakarta and the annual SEA, Southeast Asia Sea Camp in the Philippines, embrace the idea of Earth optimism, an approach that recognizes successes and insists that we can build a bright future by working and innovating together. And Waisili alumni like Johannes Lemire from Maluku go on to lead projects and pursue careers with a focus on building a brighter future. Those of you in Indonesia can learn more about Earth Optimism from Johannes as he hosts a new television series on TVRI, airing every Friday morning at 9 a.m., thanks to an ongoing partnership between the Smithsonian Institution, the Ministry of Education, and the U.S. Embassy in Jakarta. And tonight, we get to meet the people behind this programming and some of the research that it features in person. Now, I have spent my entire diplomatic career building environmental partnerships around the world. It's been a key priority for me. And part of the reason for that is because before I was a diplomat, I was a marine biologist. And I am so looking forward to this program today. What our panelists have to say is so important for us to learn. And I'm excited to join all of you in listening to them, learning from them tonight. So thank you again, and let's enjoy the discussion. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Ibu Rachel, for the warm welcome. And now let's just start the event. I'd like to pass it to our moderator for tonight. Please welcome Andrea Santi, Smithsonian Earth Optimism Program and Partnership Director. So Andrea, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. And thank you to the U.S. Embassy, to the America team, to our presenters, and to all of the viewers across Indonesia, and also our everyone who's joined from Philippines, Cambodia, and beyond. We're so glad to have everybody here with us today. As Fifi said, my name is Andrea Santi, and I am the director of the Smithsonian Conservation Commons Program Development. And as part of this role, I focus on fundraising, partnerships, as well as helping to launch Earth Optimism. I'm really excited to be here today and to talk about the Earth Optimism program. Earth Optimism is a realization that despite big challenges, environmental progress is possible when solutions are shared and replicated. With that in mind, Earth Optimism aims to fundamentally shift how we frame the narrative around the planet, from one of doom and gloom to optimism and opportunity. We started in 2017 through a partnership with the Smithsonian Institution in the US and Cambridge Conservation Initiative in the UK. The Earth Optimism movement emerged from two key realizations. One, that fear and hope lead to apathy rather than action, and that conservation successes are widespread, yet not widely appreciated. In the first year, in 2017, Cambridge and the Smithsonian hosted simultaneous summits that brought together hundreds of speakers and thousands of participants. Since then, the movement has been growing, and it's resonating with audiences worldwide. These positive stories are being shared widely, and we've reached nearly 500 million people through summits, solution fairs, MOOCs, film festivals, social media campaigns, workshops, deep dives, and webinars such as this one. It's a time of great challenges, but also a time of great opportunities. And we must create synergies among people across places, times, and cultures. Throughout 2020 and beyond, Earth Optimism is promoting conservation strategies that are being deployed worldwide. In the coming weeks, we'll be having many other events. We have World Elephant Day and International Youth Day on August 12th. We'll also be hosting a food waste panel. And so we invite everyone to continue to follow us. You can share your own stories by using the hashtag Earth Optimism. And we invite you to visit our website, earthoptimism.si.edu. Today, we're going to be hearing from an amazing group of panelists, and I'm really excited to be moderating today. And so without further ado, I'm going to kick it off. Our first speaker today is Dr. Mac Farnham. He's a public health veterinarian and an epidemiologist serving as the Morris Animal Foundation and Dennis and Connie Keller Director of Training for the Smithsonian Conservation Biology Institute's Global Health Program. In his current role, Mac champions a train the trainer approach to maximize the Global Health Program's training and international capacity building, efforts targeting current and future generations of wildlife veterinarians, conservationists, and One Health professionals. Prior to joining Smithsonian, he completed a 2-year tour as an agricultural attaché at the US Embassy in Tokyo, Japan. He spent 6 years on teaching faculty at the University of Minnesota's College of Veterinary Medicine and School of Public Health. And he served as the East Africa Technical Advisor for the USAID Emerging Pandemic Threat Respond Project from 2010 to 2015. He has a particular interest in risk communication and enjoys helping others translate technical information into effective messages and communication tools. And we're really excited to be able to hear more from Mac today. Mac.
Thank you, Andrea, and hello and greetings, everyone. As Andrea said, my name is Mac, and I'm currently serving as Director of Training for the Global Health Program at Smithsonian's Conservation Biology Institute. I do have one of those really cool jobs, and then I get to work at a zoo and with colleagues and counterparts from around the world who are dedicated to wildlife and environmental conservation and healthy populations of human and animals. In case you get the chance to come visit us, our office is located at the National Zoo in Washington, D.C. here in the US. I'm absolutely thrilled to talk to you today about Earth Optimism, as our mission at the National Zoo and Smithsonian's Conservation Biology Institute is to save species globally. This puts our work right in the action at the critical interconnection between wildlife, domestic animals, humans, and our shared environments. 3 messages I want to start and finish with today are, first, that we are all connected, humans, animals, and the environment. Second, that collaborative One Health approaches and understanding are needed to address global challenges across the human-animal environmental interface. This is a very important interconnection to highlight for Earth Optimism. And third, that your thoughts, your questions, your arguments and inputs are critical to help us make positive impacts. Global grand challenges, including species survival, food insecurity, diminishing natural resources and biodiversity, climate change, and emerging infectious diseases like COVID-19 are truly highly complex. We know that all of these challenges are driven in large part by an exponentially expanding global human population, human behaviors, and human activity. We also know that such complex challenges require equally complex solutions. And science is showing us that it is key to collaborate across disciplines, cultures, countries, beliefs, and environments to make positive impacts. One Health is the name that we put to this realization, namely that human, animal, and environmental health requires collaboration between human doctors, veterinarians, environmental and social sciences to understand complex challenges and begin to find solutions. My work with the Global Health Program focuses on training wildlife veterinarians, One Health, and conservation professionals to bridge scientific knowledge from the Smithsonian to interfaces where wildlife and humans are in increasing contact. This increased contact unfortunately contributes to emergence of zoonotic diseases. Zoonotic diseases are those that are shared between animals and humans. Usually we think of a zoonotic disease coming from a wildlife host or reservoir and spilling over into domestic animal populations or directly into humans, where they may then amplify and quickly spread, sometimes resulting in a pandemic. Humans can also transmit diseases to animals, which we've seen just a month or so ago with cases of COVID-19 in the Malayan tiger, among other great cats at the Bronx Zoo in New York City. We know that emerging diseases are best addressed as close to their sources as possible before they can emerge into human and domestic animal hosts. So we're working to build wildlife veterinary and disease surveillance capacity with our partners around the globe, connecting scientific knowledge and limited resources where the risk of disease emergence is highest. Our recent work includes capacity building efforts to conduct disease surveillance in several bat species in caves in Myanmar. My colleagues have just published a study from that work in which they identified 6 new and different coronaviruses from bats sampled in and around these caves. So we know that those viruses are there. We know that people nearby and in those caves have a relatively high risk of being exposed. Armed with that knowledge, together with our partners in Myanmar, we've developed risk communication materials and strategies to better inform local human populations on the risks of collecting bat guano from those caves, thereby helping prevent exposure and spillover of a new outbreak in humans. This is just one important example of diseases we know are circulating in wild animal populations. We also work with threatened and endangered wildlife species with local partners in ASEAN member countries, including Indonesia, to not only understand potential disease risks to humans, but to better understand and address challenges threatening species survival. A great example of this is some work we're doing with Indonesian veterinarians in Borneo to increase veterinary clinical care of orangutans. Helping these orangs that are often caught up in illegal wildlife trade and human-wildlife conflict, we're working to utilize the best veterinary clinical care possible to ensure healthy individuals can be reintroduced to and survive on their own in their home habitats. My colleagues are also studying a respiratory syndrome which develops in young orangutan, which has stark similarities in clinical presentation to cystic fibrosis, a chronic disease affecting humans. In orangs, this disease is often fatal just when they reach their prime reproductive ages, which is a huge challenge for an endangered population of great apes. By comparing similar disease presentations, we're really hopeful to utilize knowledge gained in human medicine to better manage this chronic disease and ensure survival of endangered orangutan. I'll leave you with the same 3 points I shared at the start. 1, we are all connected. 2, One Health is that collaborative, multidisciplinary approach to address complex challenges at the interface of humans, animals, and our shared environments. And 3, Earth Optimism needs you, your observations, your questions, your interests and arguments to ensure our environments, animals, and human populations thrive well into the future. Many thanks for listening and for this opportunity today. I'll hand it back over to Andrea to introduce our next speaker and look forward to some of your questions a little later in our discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mac. I can't wait to hear the questions that we're going to have a little later in this program. Now we're going to move to Dr. Chris Meyer. Chris is a research zoologist and marine invertebrate curator at the Smithsonian's National Museum of Natural History. His passion for biodiversity takes him to remote places around the globe, and he uses new tools and approaches such as DNA sequence data to document marine biodiversity, to figure out how ecosystems function, and predict how they will respond to change. Prior to joining the Smithsonian, he directed the Morea Biocode Project, a massive undertaking to build a comprehensive inventory of all species on the French Polynesian island, sampling from mountaintops to ocean depths. He's also founding members of several different initiatives, including the Genomic Observatories Network. Chris's work has been highlighted in National Geographic and is part of an ongoing exhibit at Smithsonian's Natural History Museum in DC. Chris, we welcome you today.
Thanks, Andrea. And welcome to everybody out there. Salam alaikum. It's morning here, though. My name is Chris Meyer, as Andrea said, and I'm a curator at the Smithsonian's Museum of Natural History here in Washington, D.C. So what is a curator, people might ask? Well, a curator is basically the person who's in charge of the natural history collections. And one of the questions is, well, why do we have these collections? Well, I like to think them as a library of the life on the planet. It's a record of the diversity that we have. And I kind of think of myself as a biodiversity accountant, someone who works to count and record the life on our planet and how it's changed through time and is changing now. My own research generally looks at coral reef biodiversity. So coral reefs, as you might know, are considered the rainforests of the sea. But when people think about this coral reef diversity, they generally only think about the corals and the fishes. However, when you look really closely at a reef, like we did with David Litzschwager when we did this 1 cubic foot story for National Geographic, and we pulled apart just that 1 cubic foot, we find that the corals, we find this vast array of creatures in just, again, that one little footprint, like what your footprint would be. And only about 20% of that diversity, slightly less than 20%, are the corals and the fish. So the corals and fish you can think of is just kind of the surface of this more complex system. I kind of like to think of them as kind of the skin. And while the skin's a really important organ on our body, there's many more internal systems that we might want to monitor for ocean health. But the challenge is how to access that without ripping apart the reef. We don't want to be destructive in doing that. So in order to do that, we've developed these structures called ARMS that I consider kind of like biological weather stations or barometers. So what are ARMS? ARMS stand for Autonomous Reef Monitoring Structures. And as you can see here, they're composed of stacked PVC open and closed spaces. And these are built from the same material and they're built to the same specification everywhere. So, and they also then mimic the reef, turning the nooks and crannies in the reef system, turning the reef inside out so we can actually peer inside to these other species that provide critical functions for healthy reef ecosystems. So as you can see here, ARMS are anchored on the seafloor for a period of time. And here's one in New Caledonia. And after 1 year, managed to take the picture just right to get that image. You can see we go back and recover it. So it's like prefabricated housing. We let the animals move in and then we come back and recover it. We put a mesh line crate over top. So we capture all the creatures that have moved in. And after we recover the ARMS, then we take them back and we take them apart and count all the creatures and record everything living in it. It's
Adriano Sumbiring is currently a director for Bionesia and a Pew Marinovello, where in the past and even until right now, he and his team are still doing this research where he used genetic tools to be able to identify species of shark just using their skin. So the problems with this, the problem with the shark fishers right now, like because many of the body part of the shark was thrown through the ocean because they are less because they have a less economic value. So it's for researcher, it becomes difficult to identify the species. So Adriano Sumbiring focused on this and using genetic approach to be able to identify the species just using the genetic tools. Not just shark, but Dian Prativi is leading this role in working with big eye tuna population research, where we are interested in defining the size of the population of tuna across Indonesia. Indonesia is really a big fisheries country where many of its tuna are exported to Japan and many other countries. So the research that that Dian is doing and her team is doing is really important in providing an information for the conservation institution how to manage tuna well in the future so that the fisheries become sustainable. So, and the next leader for this research is Eka. Eka Kurniasi just finished her master's degree from University of Diponegoro, Semarang, and she is still actively doing her research even until right now with the supervision of Chris Meyer and many other experts in both Indonesia and US. Eka and her team are really interested in delineating a decapod biodiversity across Indonesia because many of this particular species have been really underestimated in terms of their diversity, mostly because of their small size, and then it's not things that we see every day, but we see every day. So Eka highlighting the importance of not just particularly highlighting the diversity of big species, for example, like coral and reef. So she focused on doing this and then collecting the data across Indonesia. And then the last research that I want to highlight here is that this, from what Chris has just explained, Dita Cahyani, which is now currently a PhD candidate and my lab mates in UC Los Angeles. Dita is leading this research from deploying the arms as well as doing the lab work and then doing the data analysis, where we expect that we can see more diversity recorded from Indonesia. So this research is still actively ongoing even until right now. So you can always contact me or Dita if you want to hear more about this research. And then, so I think the things that I want to highlight here is that many of this research need to be hosted and then need to be facilitated so that we can hear more from the young researcher if they want to do research. So we've built this Bionesia Biodiversity Indonesia, where we gather more Indonesian young researchers to do research, but also facilitate international collaboration to do more research in Indonesia. And then last but not least is that I think I want to highlight that the future is bright, the enthusiasm is there. Many of the young researchers are interested in doing more research and then contribute to the conservation. The future, despite of everything that we are experiencing today, the future is bright, but I just want to highlight that we need to work together in making that dreams come true. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Aji. That was really great. And it's so exciting to see all of this research from your colleagues across Indonesia. I am going to just wrap it up, and then we're going to move on to questions. I just wanted to take a second to highlight some of the things that we heard from our presenters today. One of the key takeaways for me was about collaboration. All of you spoke about the importance of collaboration and how this is important both across sectors in the case of One Health, where we're looking at human, animal, and wildlife health, as well as across cultures and in collaborating with scientists, which we heard a lot from Chris and Aji. We also heard about developing capacity. So Mac is working with Train the Trainers, and Chris and Aji, you both really were driving home that message about the importance in investing in that next generation and making sure that everywhere that conservation is happening, that people on the ground have skills and abilities to be able to take that forward. And Aji, thank you so much for all of those examples of amazing Indonesian conservationists that are doing really interesting and technical work. And lastly, I thought that another really important piece of what Smithsonian does and all of your work is this idea of monitoring changes. And so whether it's diving in and going into caves to figure out which bats might have coronavirus, or setting up the arms and looking at all of these different levels of species with the barcoding. I think that it's just one of those really key things that Smithsonian does and that's so important to science is this ability to monitor. And so we're really excited to be able to have these examples. These examples are exactly what Earth Optimism is about, being able to hear what's working in conservation from a lot of different angles and lenses, both at those big scales and also down to that local level. And being able to help solve these problems when we can hear what other people are doing, when we can hear these solutions, that helps to be able to inspire others to be able to take their solutions or add on and scale up and replicate. And so thank you so much to all of you for your excellent presentations. That was really great. And I know that we already have lots and lots of questions in our chat. And so I am going to go and start asking a few questions. So Mac, I'm going to start with you. How does the National Zoo manage One Health?
Wow, what a great question to start with. I think that we've recognized over the last couple decades, even 30 years, that this need for One Health approaches. So that, again, that multidisciplinary collaborative approach to addressing some pretty significant challenges in both human and wildlife and environmental health. And so as far as managing, I mean, we're always looking for ways to come up with collaborative projects across the zoo. And it's not just at the zoo. We actually collaborate with people like Chris and Aji through the other Smithsonian affiliations like the National Museum of Natural History. So we're constantly looking for ways to reach out and collaborate and try to grasp the bigger picture of what's going on in ecosystems and contributing to some of these animal diseases that we're focused on maybe at the zoo. But again, you think of things like emerging diseases, so influenzas and coronaviruses that are coming in sometimes with people into our zoo environment and can impact the animal populations in our zoo. And a lot of those animals are critically endangered. So obviously that's pretty dangerous. So it's less of a management approach, I'd say, and more of just like, again, going back to this Earth Optimism theme, that one person or one discipline doesn't hold all the answers and solutions, and that we really need to focus on collaboration and troubleshooting and this scientific iterative approach to trial and error and learn from what we do and apply that to the next iteration. So I'm not quite sure I answered your question directly, but I think it's that outlook, that One Health outlook that we're really looking to capture. And the Smithsonian is a great and huge institution. We have fingers and partnerships all over the world that make this really help us leverage to make an impact, positive impact in the world.
Great, thank you so much. And you did a great job answering. So Chris, here's one for you. And I'm going to just read it. Amid COVID-19, where mask, gloves, and other PPE are massively being produced and used on all sectors and nations worldwide, how can we help to minimize their negative effect on our oceans?
Wow, that's a good question, Andrea.
Maybe a little bit outside.
It concerns me all the time. I mean, all the food processing now and takeout and all the plastics and products that are being used and thrown away or hopefully recycled responsibly. I mean, the microplastic phenomena is now becoming a bigger and bigger issue. We're finding microplastics just in about every habitat, certainly any aquatic habitat. It's very prevalent. And there certainly is going to be a spike in that regardless of how we do, I imagine. But I think, as a recommendation, and again, I'm not a recycling expert or a waste disposal expert in this in any way. We have thought about using the arms and fish guts and things like that to look for microplastics, to be, like we're talking about, monitoring change through time and finding hot spots for that. But again, I would encourage everybody in this capacity to be responsible in the waste management associated with that. I mean, it's going to happen undoubtedly. But hopefully we'll get through this if everybody is responsible with social distancing and stuff. And so one of the best things to do is to try to behave responsibly and minimize the time that we have to go through this pandemic to knock it down. So we have to use less and less of that material. So.
Thank you so much. We're going to move to one about youth and optimism. Aji, this one is for you. How can the youth use optimism in creating solutions in today's pandemic? What's your take on that?
So the question is about, can you say that again, sorry?
Sure. How can the youth use optimism in creating solutions in today's pandemic?
So I think the solution to that is nurture of whatever interest that you have right now, believing that could bring a positive impact onto your environment. Make sure that you are aware of how the world and the earth is progressing right now. So it's not always, if you have an interest about environment, but like many other young teenagers have also interest about, not always about environment, but how can we use those interests and then having those interests and bringing optimism, and then make sure that you have a really positive impact on how the world and our society progress in the future. I think that's the thing that we want to do. So it's not always about the environment, it's important, but also other thing is also important, but make sure that you always have things in your mind that how can we as a young generation good and providing a positive impact to the world around you. I think that's the things that I want to highlight this with.
Thank you so much. And there's a couple different questions about Earth optimism, so I'm going to pose one to myself. So how is Earth optimism relevant or helpful in addressing current issues on global warming and the environmental phenomena? And I'm going to kind of piggyback that one with one about how does Earth optimism actually work? So I didn't really go into the details. I'm going to start with how it works. So Earth optimism has focused on a series of events We had some big summits that I talked about. We've used MOOCs, we've used webinars. And the way that it works is really about bringing people together to communicate and share their stories. So this webinar is kind of a small version of what we were doing with Earth Optimism. We've had 2 summits, one in 2017 and another digital summit in 2020. If you go to the website, you can hear all of these different talks from hundreds of different experts from around the world. And the way that we feel that it is useful and how it's really helping to address it is that when you're able to hear from people from across sectors, so we talked about collaboration, we talked about the importance of being able to draw from different sectors. When you hear solutions from many different people across sectors, you start to both see similarities and commonalities, but also you hear ideas that may be out of the box for the way that you're working. And so we really believe that by hearing these solutions, by seeing what's working in other places, that is able to inspire and spur both innovation and creativity as well as replication. And that is the way that we have been pushing these events and rolling them out. We just did one on World Rainforest Day the other day. As I said, there's one on World Elephant Day, and we have many others that are going to be coming up. And we also really encourage other people to do their own Earth Optimism events. We know that there's so many solutions out there. And so by having people do their own Earth Optimism events, which they can actually put on our website by uploading the event in our global events portal, that helps to share what's working in other places. And they can be done in any language. They are done by lots of partners around the world. And so we encourage you to check it out, visit the website. So let me go back and find another question. Susan is helping me on the back end. So here's one that I'm going to put out to Chris and Aji. How can marine and environmental experts, scientists, innovators, scholars use their work to influence others and take positive and proactive steps to help promote conservation?
I can start with that. So, the ocean's a spectacular place, but not everybody gets to see it. You kind of have to put your head underwater or be, their experience with it might be a fish market or something like that. And I think that a big part of why I'm excited about the ocean is just the sense of discovery and curiosity and seeing the amazing diversity and being aware that it exists, and then conveying that. So just getting out and walking around in the intertidal if you're not swimming and taking a look and towards the previous question that Aji answered about what can we do in the pandemic, it's a great opportunity to just slow down and better appreciate the world directly around you that impacts you, that you may not have taken the time to look at. And we did that with the 1 cubic foot activities where, you were forced to kind of just watch this amazing diversity that passes through a small space. And because of that, it changes your behavior. You learn to realize that, walking off a path, there's a lot of creatures just right off your path, or that you have a direct impact. So it's from a marine researcher and biodiversity, I really like just that awareness, because it's like knowing about it is the first step to caring about it. And that's the most important thing I think we can convey. And everywhere we've gone to do one of these arms workshops or one of the decapod training or whatever, we have invite school groups to come and have kids appreciate their natural heritage and take, ownership and pride in their backyards. And I think that's a huge step towards generating the next generation of conservation-minded folks.
So my take on that is that this is our responsibility. This is not just marine biodiversity, like marine researcher. Like I think the way that we need to see a conservation is that it's shared responsibility. Like everyone needs to contribute on that, and then and then contribute, and then like if you are a researcher, like do research that can contribute to conservation. Like if you just have an interest in marine biodiversity, like just go out there, experience the biodiversity, and see things in the ocean, and then hopefully you can be inspired just by seeing that. And then I think the inspiration is the first step, and then move from that. You can then just try to protect it, share the stories, share the positive impact. Like I see this, I think, for example, like I see this on the ocean, you can share it with your friends. I think more and more young generation have more interest in environment, and then with the spread of social media, I think that we can use that spirit of like optimism to share the good and positive stories. And then there's another aspect of that. Like if we are talking about policy, talk to your local representative and sort of that. But I think the things that we can do right now is to spread the optimism. If you see something in the ocean, and share the stories like this is beautiful, and then we need to save it so that everyone can see it.
Thank you. And kind of building on that, someone asked a question about how can young, students who are interested in conservation get into conservation? Maybe some of you could, maybe Aji, we could start with you to talk a little bit about how you got into this.
So I started back in 2006. Around that, I was in this marine science department in Bogor Agricultural University. At that time, the fisheries scientists, like fisheries, it's not that really popular. People will ask you why. People will ask you like, why would you go to that department? Like, there's no future there. Basically saying that, like, but then more and more university right now, especially in Indonesia, are building up their program in fisheries science, because they realize that like high percentage of economy in Indonesia is driven from the fisheries. And I think the step that you want to go in, like there's so many volunteer opportunity out there in Indonesia. You can always contact me. Like if you want to hear more about that, I can always put you in contact with folks in Indonesia. That's the first step. And second step, if you want to do a college or degree in fisheries or marine science, more and more universities are opening more program on this particular interest. And then more and more international collaboration in terms of like education in Indonesia is happening right now, because they see that this is a really good model of building research as well as training a young generation to do marine related research. Maybe Chris want to add more on that.
Well, yeah, just to add, like, I mean, you don't have to be a professional conservationist to conserve and be conscientious about your impacts. I think that having a sense of curiosity and being passionate about these things, you become self-identified. I would encourage everybody out there that we all make decisions every day that impact our environment. And the question about the plastics and the reuse and the recycling and responsible behavior. And I think it's telling the good stories and highlighting those to your friends and family are really impactful. And again, just that inner, kind of just being excited about the world around you and wanting to share that and tell the stories that excite you. Really, it's the people and their stories that I find the most engaging and that I tend to listen to. And I think it draws the attention of the potential your potential teachers and your tutors and role models to see that in the next generation. It's very attractive. So keep that up.
And I'll jump in to add a little bit too. One of the most common themes we see in people in conservation-oriented careers and in science careers in general is that they get a early exposure at some time in their childhood, whether it's through hiking or camping or fishing or going to visiting zoos or just being outdoors in general. That generates some of that framework interest in conservation. So, I mean, Chris and Ajay have given a great example of what they're doing in the coral reef. You can go outside in your own, just outside your front door and take a measuring tape and measure out a square meter and try to identify all the life forms there with the ability you have. You won't have expensive barcoding technology, obviously, but you can definitely try to identify insects or birds that are in that location, and just getting excited about it from early on and following that interest. I really never imagined that I would end up working in the role I'm in now. I've really developed. I knew I was interested in wild animals. I knew I was interested in working with people from diverse backgrounds across the world and in travel. And you just start with those core interests and kind of follow where your passion leads you. You can go really far and get great experiences around the world by just asking questions and saying, hey, can I come along on that and be included? And more times than not, the answer is yes, and you'll just be able to follow your passion.
Thank you. That was great. And I'm going to just wrap up with one last question that I'd like you all three to answer, which is, what makes you optimistic? Mac, we'll start with you.
Boy, I hope that, I shared through my presentation, what makes me optimistic is that again, despite these huge, seemingly overwhelming challenges of climate change and loss in biodiversity and emerging infectious diseases, the thing that makes me optimistic is knowing that as an individual, I can't solve those things. I have to reach out and go find other experts and collaborators and other ideas that challenge my way of thinking. So to me, the thing that makes me most optimistic is that every day I wake up and I don't quite know what the day holds. There's always some new challenge that keeps me interested and engaged. And yeah, it's just a great time to be alive in this information age. We can do things like this where we're virtually connecting across the world in real time. I mean, this is only possible in the last 5-10 years, really. And boy, I get really excited about connecting with people around the world in this fashion. So I hope I've shared some of my optimism and that it's rubbing off on the participants and people engaged today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mac. Chris, tell us, what makes you optimistic?
Makes me optimistic. So I think two things. Obviously, the next generation and all this technology that's going to allow people to speak and get their voices heard and communicate across cultures and ages and everything. But I think one of the things, I mean, we hear all this doom and gloom about coral reefs and bleaching and thermal stress and ocean acidification and all this stuff. I mean, this arms program has been unbelievably revealing in that you put down the same thing, it's the same structure, and you put it in a marine protected area, and you saw the growth on that arms. Like these reefs have this incredible capacity to bounce back and to respond if you have the right, local efforts in conservation. Overfishing and water quality are the two big things, and you see that everywhere you go. I mean, you don't have to do fancy science. You just realize you can't fit the crate over top, because the system takes what you gives it and makes even more. And in every place we've gone where we've compared areas under conservation, with marine protected areas and areas not, it's the exact same story. The reefs can bounce back. They have that resilience, and it's not too late. And there's this hedge in the system that will allow it to respond. And I'm super optimistic about that. So.
Thank you. And we can see how, our human behavior can change really quickly. We're experiencing that right now. And so it also, I think that optimism and knowing that we do have answers and we do know what to do. Now it's just making sure we get that behavior change to follow. Aji, what makes you optimistic?
So the things that really make me optimistic about this is that I see that the young generation have really huge interest in contributing to the conservation of marine biodiversity. Like every time we make a program, there are always application are overwhelming. But so yeah, nurturing that interest, making sure that their interest is well nurtured, and then they can do something about their interest is what makes me optimistic. Like more and more startup or programs, they are focusing more on protecting biodiversity. So the interest out there is not lacking. It's just that we need to channel them and then making sure that the program that they build really making impact to the world around them. Yeah, that's what.
Thank you so much. And I couldn't agree more that, there is no lack of interest. I think that, all the many people who have joined us today shows that there's a huge interest in learning, in being part of the solution. And thank you so much to America for hosting this. I do invite everyone to visit our website, earthoptimism.si.edu, and also to use the hashtag earthoptimism when you're sharing your own stories. I am now going to pass it back to Fifi. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Andrea, and of course, thank you to all of our speakers for the great session today, and of course, for answering all of the questions. So earlier in the event, guys, I have a question. And the question is, true or false, the airline industry has the biggest carbon footprint compared to any other industries? And the correct answer is false. Why? Because the fashion industry has the biggest footprint. In fact, it is responsible for 10% of annual global carbon emissions, more than all international flights and maritime shipping combined. And congratulations to Nabila Ananda from Twitter for answering correctly. So congratulations, Nabila. Thank you to everyone who has participated. Don't forget to tune in next time and get a chance from us. And now you may be wondering, how can you develop an awesome idea for a place like this? Easy, just simply go to our website at www.atamerica.or.id. Go to create a program and go to collaborate with us. All proposals coming to us will be reviewed and your event might be featured here soon. All right, so don't forget to also subscribe to our YouTube channel. So that's wrap this episode. Don't forget to follow our Instagram account, Twitter account, and also Facebook account for all of our event updates, fun content, and so much more. All right, thank you for tuning in and see you next time. Bye.